what's not said is more key than what is.
Red Bull's biggest nightmare right now is Max leaving Red Bull. Our frame of reference for what is to be expected is not the same as it is for every other team, right? The problem at Red Bull is that you can't expect the second driver, I think, to be like standardly within that 3/10 of Max because
Sure.
the car is that difficult to drive.
Sure. I think part of the issue is right there is that romanticism with bringing Daniel back, which only one person has it, right? It's Christian Horner who wants to do that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tired F1 Pod with me, Shez, and you, Ammar. How the heck are you?
I am great. How are you doing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a bit worried. What am I going to do with my weekends? Like now that there's no F1 over the summer break.
Well, funny you say that. We're gonna load up this break with some exciting debates, new topics. You never know, man.
Whoop whoop whoop. That's right. Stay here, be
Stay
entertained.
here, hit subscribe. About 80% of you are watching us but are not hitting the subscribe button. Please do us a favor and hit the subscribe button. And there you go. There's my 2-minute self-indulgent speech out of the way.
Shameless
Shameless plug.
advertising on our own channel. Unbelievable.
We are self-supported, by the way, while we're on the topic, just so you know, we have no sponsors yet.
Yeah. Despite this on
this,
nearly every video.
I mean, we've angered a few people at Red Bull, so there's that too.
That's called journalistic integrity, Ammar.
Journalistic integrity. Wonderful. Wonderful.
So we've had some announcements after a pretty interesting Belgian Grand Prix, which we discussed in our last video. Almost immediately the next day, we had two major announcements, which I don't think are particularly unrelated. So the first one that came out was that Carlos Sainz has signed for Williams for 2025. And the second was that Checo Perez is staying at Red Bull after the summer break. And that's not really an announcement because it was more of a leak to the press, because I guess there's no way that a team that have just given a 2-year contract to a driver are going to announce that they're not sacking him. But anyway, that happened.
They're not renewing their vows or anything like that on like a YouTube video or anything. No, that would be a fun thing to do. No,
sure, I would probably watch that.
I would probably watch that too.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about these two in turn. So let's talk Checo first. What did you think of that decision?
I think it's a very interesting time that we're at, right? Because we did get news for something that really shouldn't have been newsworthy. I mean, you just said it. They confirmed or extended Checo for a couple more years 2 months ago. So it's not like this was something that needed to be announced. You know, this is not a typical sort of vacancy. And I think what's not said is more key than what is said, right? So as we have it right now, Checo is coming back after the summer break, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he will keep his seat, much longer in the season if things don't go according to plan. Which to me is like, well, what else are you waiting to see happen? Like, I feel like the bottom has already been hit. So what else is there? Is there another sort of threshold at where it's at? And we'll get into that a little bit. But it's not a guarantee that he will continue this season. I don't think there's a guarantee that he'll continue next season. So I think in essence, Red Bull is kind of leaving everything up in the air, not just for that Red Bull seat, but also the seat at RB as well. So I'm not quite sure we'll get any other news coming out of that. I'd be really surprised if you heard anything else come out of there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the wording of what was let out, and we have to take this from what other people have said. But what I've got here is this is quoted directly from the race. They've said Checo remains a Red Bull racing driver despite recent speculation, and we look forward to seeing him perform at tracks he has previously excelled at after the summer break. So that's
insulting, by the way. That's really insulting, right? Like if I'm Checo, I'm insulted. Granted, okay, I don't have form right now, but what are you actually saying? Like, so now if you don't perform at these tracks, I think Baku is one of them, and what else is there? I can't remember.
Zandvoort will be there.
Right? He's had a good run there. So you're saying that. So this is how do you think they went to Checo and said this? These are your two favorite tracks, Checo. If you don't do well here, It's over, man. It's this time it's for real. It's over. Like that. You think that's how they said it to him?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Checo will be sitting there going, they're not going to sack me. I can do what the hell I want because every time they say someone thinks that I'm going to get sacked, they turn around, have a crunch meeting, and then tell me I'm driving again anyway. So it's just an ongoing thing. That's fine. It sounds like they want to keep him, but can we have a little look at like the
Yeah,
different
the
factors
macro. Yeah.
that this affects, right? So first of all, the performance side of things. Yeah. Do we think that that Perez has justified being left in the car based on performance, his own performance?
So I think the answer would be no, right? But I don't think this is that simple, right? Because I think the lack of making a move for Checo is more reflective of Red Bull sort of driver academy, driver performance, driver sort of development program itself, right? And I think that they're looking around seeing, well, they're at some level, Shez, the math is, does Liam Lawson help us do a little bit better than him, right? As in Checo. Does Daniel Ricciardo help us do a little bit better? And those are probably the two drivers they're
Amar,
looking at, right?
we'll get to that in a
We'll get
second.
to that, but what I'm
But
saying is
specifically
there,
about his performance.
right. So I mean, the performance by itself isn't there yet, but clearly there's something there. And look, I hate to be speculative of stuff, but just go ask Pierre Gasly how he's feeling right now. Just go ask Alex Albon, who were given a much shorter leash. By the way, Red Bull made Drive to Survive famous largely because of the way they talked about keeping drivers. If you remember, I can't remember what season this is. It was right about now, whatever summer break was, right? And Pierre Gasly was confirmed to continue after the summer break. And then not 2 weeks into the summer break, they sacked him. So this is a team that has been ruthless. So for them to be so kind to Checo makes no sense to me other than there's something off track that's happening there.
Do you think that maybe it's we're being a little harsh on Checo? Maybe that's the problem, that that the Red Bull clearly is not the car that it was last season that was
Yeah,
prancing off into the distance.
that's
So
fair.
so
Yep.
perhaps it's not Perez's
Well,
fault that
but
he's not performing.
yeah, and I think what I was trying to go there with that, my initial point is that, look, this is not a problem that has come up just this season, right? We've been there the last 2 years too, at various points. And the reality was Red Bull had a car that was so dominant and the other teams hadn't put together what they have now been able to do so that they kind of sort of never paid attention to it, right? Then they kind of kept kicking the can down the road, which is effectively what they're doing right now too, because if they had identified the issue before and they were going to make a change, they would at least line themselves up with another alternative, which they don't seem to have. The only person you could argue that should be in that seat is Yuki Tsunoda, based on pure performance. But for whatever reason, he's not going to get that. So you can't really blame Checo for all of that. And let's be honest here too. Red Bull has focused a lot of their development around what Max wants, right? That's part of the reason why Carlos couldn't get that seat, right? Even if he wanted to, because there would be that battle. And so they have done everything they could to appease Max. And it's no wonder that Max came out right after the race, I think a few hours ago, whatever it was, saying, "Look, the problem is not Checo, the problem is the car," right? And so I think you're fair to assume that would another driver have done better than him? And I don't know, it's marginal, right? We haven't seen anything that sort of said, unless you were going to bring in Carlos Sainz next year, he's the only driver I could argue from who's available or was available as of a couple of days ago that could have made that difference. Otherwise, it's a wash.
Yeah, I think this is important. Do so. I'm not sure I agree with the whole the car is built for Max kind of thing. I think it's more Max is an absolute generational talent, right? He's he's nothing short of that, and the car has a particular potential. It's difficult to access that potential. Max happens to be able to access it because his driving style allows him to do that. It's just that Red Bull haven't found another driver that can replicate that or can come close to replicating that or can adapt their driving style so that they're at least mildly comfortable with it. And Checo was thought to be that guy. And season after season, the same pattern has happened, hasn't it? That at the beginning of the season, he starts off okay. He actually has a run of races where you think, right, he's on it. before it was he's going to mount a championship challenge. Now it's sort of turned into, okay, he's not going to lose his seat. I mean, that's the
Seems
that's
like a
the
decade
the
ago.
the, the, the degradation of
Well,
his
but
of his standing. But is is it that they're happy to give him more time because they understand that Checo is performing about as well as anybody
yeah.
is reasonably able to perform in that car, because it's not an easy car to drive. And actually, this season more than the last two, he's been exposed more because the car's been exposed more.
Yeah, but Ches, what we're talking about here, and to be fair to Red Bull too, the expectation isn't to put the car on pole, right? The
It's to
expectation is
be in the ballpark, though,
is
isn't
to be
it?
in the ballpark, which he has not been. And look, the Belgian Grand Prix was actually a pretty big disaster. Like, how far away was he from not making it to Q3? Like this, he went from zero to hero and then back to being zero. And you can argue that in Belgium, right, when we've already established that overtaking was hard, there's no reason why he couldn't have been on the podium because he was contending with Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc at that point. So to see
Well,
that kind of
Max didn't make
precipitous.
a huge amount of forward
Max
progress
didn't make, but
either.
he also started P11, right? So I mean, there's that, right? He was starting P2, Shez. We're not talking about like so there was plenty of opportunity for him to hold on. And where did he end up? Nowhere close to it. And without the George disqualification, I mean, look, if Mercedes or whatever, if those circumstances were different, then George would have likely been on the podium, right? And so there's that too. Like, so how is it that you're not able to keep up with folks? That's the ask. The
Yeah,
ask
but
isn't to have a race winning car week in and out from him
but I thought
performance.
Checo actually was the opposite of his normal in Belgium. He qualified actually quite well,
Almost.
and in the wet. That's that's not Checo. It's not the Checo I know. Checo's rubbish in the wet. That's what I heard. But actually, he did all right, didn't he? And qualified on the ultimate front row. Right. It's
Yeah.
just in the
I
race
mean,
he went backwards, which is not what we usually expect from Sergio Perez.
but
It
that's the
didn't help him. It didn't
expectation
look
for
very,
Red Bull, right? I mean, if Red Bull were devising it, what do we need from a second driver kind of thing? That's exactly what they're looking for. Is look, Max can't Max put the car ahead by half a second at that point. So you can be within half a second. I mean, that's it's not like Checo was, a tenth off of Max pace either, right? So it wasn't in that regard, it wasn't an extraordinary performance either. That is just to be expected. It's a par performance in that regard.
but our frame of reference for what is to be expected is not the same as it is for every other team, right? The problem at Red Bull is that you can't expect the second driver, I think, to be like standardly within that three
Yeah,
tenths of Max, because the
sure,
car is that difficult to drive.
sure. Yeah,
Right.
I think.
And like I said, Max is able to do that. Nobody else at the moment that we have seen is able
Well,
to do that. Alex Albon talked about the fact that to drive it, to get anything out of it, you have to have the sensitivity so wound up tight that if you blink funny, you're going to end up in the hedge. And that's what seems to happen to Checo every single time he gets in the
yeah.
car.
Well, and this is why you can blame a lot of it on Red Bull too, right? I don't think that they expected this season to play out the way it has thus far. I don't think that they were naive in thinking that nobody was going to catch up, but I don't think they had the likes of McLaren, the likes of Mercedes, and even Ferrari to some extent, right? At least early on, be all right there with them, which is where they're at now. And now it would be one thing if just one of those three teams were there. They could have still managed it, and Checo could have looked
Hmm.
like he would be at least in the top five, maybe in the top six, seven. And I think what they have now is they have a situation that has gotten out of hand and they have no other way to go. And look, this is just as much about Checo's performance as it is about who else they have in the stable, which is
Okay.
not, there's no confidence coming out of those guys either, barring one who will not get that seat.
Okay. So let's talk about that, because I think the point here about performance is Checo doing enough performance wise to, if not guarantee, but at least make safe Red Bull's position in the Constructors' Championship? That's all that they need Checo for, really, and on the odd occasion to back up Max when he's in a position where a result isn't guaranteed. Um, and I think what we can both agree on is that his performance isn't good enough at the moment to do that. But my question is, is there an alternative anywhere in the grid, whether within the Red Bull paddock or stable, sorry, Red Bull stable, or not, who we think would be able to jump in that car and make that constructors safe?
Well, I think now it's a little too late, right? Like this change needed to be made a little bit earlier, and especially if they're going to put it past the summer break. I think the question now is, can they do
Well,
anything for
Ammar, I've
24?
got before you carry on, I do need to put a little
Caveat.
say caveat on that in that the science announcement came out very, very soon before Perez's sort of leaked announcement, right? So my understanding of that is that Red Bull had already closed the
Yeah,
door on
correct.
Carlos Sainz. So it
Absolutely.
wasn't a case of they've lost an
Oh
opportunity.
no, no. But what I
They
was
they said
saying,
no to him, didn't they?
right, and they say no to him fairly early on. I think there was a better shot at Mercedes than there was at Red Bull. And I think that, well, that's and if you're going to hold them accountable for that, it cannot be in this moment, right? This has to go back weeks, even months, if that's the case. So I think that's fair. Hey, look, they clearly don't have. I mean, you can some of this goes back to bringing Daniel Ricciardo back, right? So evidently he hasn't panned out the way, but you have to imagine, could they have put someone else in that seat that could have possibly shown some glimpses of someone that could be paired up with Max? And I think they kind of lost that opportunity by doing that with
Mm.
Daniel too. Well, go
I mean,
ahead.
the problem is they're sort of junior drivers like Isaac Hadjar doing great in F2 at the moment, but he's clearly not
Yeah,
quite ready for
but if
F1 and certainly not by their own admission. So they can't stick him in the car.
but they're
So
your
having
junior team, so at least see what you have, no?
and just put somebody in there.
No, no, put him in the RB. And this goes back to earlier this year, last year, when they decided to bring Daniel back. I think part of the issue is right there is that romanticism with bringing Daniel back, which only one person has it, right? It's Christian Horner who wants to do that, right? Like I think that they've missed they're kind of working themselves out of the window of trying out what the new drivers are. That's my point, right? And the whole idea was that Daniel was going to replace Checo at some point. I mean, that was the only reason that was done, right? And that hasn't panned out. And
Okay,
it so
so someone look at the alternatives that we're talking about here, right? It's not like if Red Bull had a Kimi Antonelli sitting in the background, right? Then I think Checo would have been gone by now. Like there'd be no question. He wouldn't be in that seat. Their problem is that they don't have a Kimi Antonelli in the car. They on their books. They've got Daniel Ricciardo, who so far this season has been
yeah.
up until now pretty much outperformed by Yuki Tsunoda. They've got Yuki Tsunoda, who they've now had on their books for since 2021, who has made some progress forward, but they clearly don't trust him particularly. And there's something about Yuki that that still grates the Red Bull family.
But that's a reflection on their
But
driver development program too,
he
right?
has
So,
had 3 seasons though, right? And Daniel Ricciardo is the first driver he's comprehensively outperformed so far, and Daniel Ricciardo has been out of Formula One for 6 months before he came back
but look,
and broken his wrist, right? And then you've got Liam Lawson, who was he was a super sub, but also doesn't feel like the kind of driver who's going to go out there and win world championships. And the problem for Red Bull is that none of those alternatives, any driver that isn't going to win a world championship or is going to run somebody close in a world championship is going to make any further progress in that car than the driver that is in there already.
no, but that's not what the second Red Bull seat is for, right? Checo Perez was brought in to be a Kimi Raikkonen to a Sebastian Vettel at Ferrari, right? To say, okay, he's going to be there to score solid points for us week in and out, and then on the odd occasion, when Seb struggles or is out for whatever reason, he kind of do it. That's the expectation because you want to pair it up with
Yeah.
Max to the set. So, I mean, I guess so. I'll push back on it. They do have a driver in Yuki that could do that. Yuki has
No,
shown enough to at least
he
deserve a
hasn't.
shot.
I don't think so.
Oh, come on. You can't say
In that,
but you're gonna argue that Yuki does not deserve a shot, but they were gonna bring
oh no, no,
Daniel back to resurrect him from the dead to give him
I,
that opportunity because
no,
they
but
were
they're not
lining him up to
giving,
do that.
but they're not giving
But
either of them an
well, because
opportunity.
that
That's
Daniel hasn't panned out.
Mate, I think that the issue here is that neither of those drivers are a championship or caliber or championship contending caliber drivers. I'm not saying they need a driver to beat Max over a season. I'm saying you need that kind of driver, someone that is adaptable, that is able to take they're given, and make the most of it. A proper raise the floor kind of driver, because at the moment none of their drivers are able to do that. I'm saying that a raise the floor kind of driver, the Fernando Alonso kind of driver, is the only kind of driver that's going to be able to bring the performance to that car, that's going to be able to do the things they need that driver to do. And a driver like that, I don't think is available.
I mean, look, earlier on, Alex Albon was available too. Like now none of these. See, now the driver market has effectively closed. But if you're Red Bull and you're making this decision, I think, look, they banked on a few things. Like I said, they did not expect competition to get here this quickly, right? They probably thought next year maybe. The other thing is their upgrades really haven't worked, right? So they had to kind of take that step back too. And I think the car development progress has stalled a little bit, at least relative to the competition. And I think this is why you're seeing Sergio's performances be exacerbated by the fact that, if Max is struggling to get past the field in Belgium, then evidently Checo cannot do anything either, right? Which is what we saw. So that's
Yeah,
kind of where we're at.
yeah, I agree. Red Bull's biggest nightmare right now is Max leaving Red Bull, because that then turns them into a proper midfield team,
Yeah, they're done. They're done. If Max leaves
right?
now, I mean, and there's a good chance he might defect to Mercedes too, right?
Yeah.
So,
And and when we're talking about alternatives and we're talking about performance, that has to be in the back of their mind, that if Max leaves, their lead driver would then be Checo Perez. Like, just think about that. That's a big problem for Red Bull.
yeah. Well, I think the question is how solid then all these driver contracts are, right? Because evidently there are a lot of clauses and things like that we don't know. So you never know. The F1 driver market can be sillier than one can imagine, right? But I'm with you. I think they did the math incorrectly in that if they were going to make a move with Checo, that would have had to be done right about the time when they announced his extension, right? And they never quite did that. And I'm not sure that they can replace him the rest of the season and have any other impact on their championship. I think they've effectively
Yeah,
thrown in the towel on winning the constructors, in my opinion. And I think they're going to do all they can to support Max winning his fourth. That's about as good as they can do, because
that's
at this rate, they're not going to win at all. And it's not just McLaren, it's Mercedes, it's Ferrari. And on the odd occasion, it's the Aston Martin too. So
yeah.
you can't really,
Yeah, I think I agree with you that it's very easy to say let's replace Checo Perez. It's much more difficult to say, right, we're going to replace him with this person and expect that person to be an actual upgrade on
Can I ask you
on
quickly
Checo
though,
Perez.
if
Yeah, of
while
course.
we're on it, what does this mean for Daniel? Shouldn't they be making that change now? If they don't really, if clearly they don't, and look, at this point, you're not seeing Daniel being able to go into Red Bull and make an impact. Should you already be planning for 26 by getting someone else in right now and giving them whatever half of the remaining season is? Shouldn't you be doing that already
Yeah. Okay, hand to heart, do you think Daniel Ricciardo is that guy?
to replace Checo?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think so. But
So,
evidently they think so, right?
but do they? They haven't done it yet.
They haven't done it yet. So, but then what do you do? Do you still keep him at RB the rest of the year? Like, why not get someone in now? And what is the future? So, do
Well,
you think they're
he's
to
doing better against
25?
Yuki Tsunoda now than he was at the beginning of the season, isn't he?
But then does that mean he has a shot for 25? Because Checo's not confirmed for 25. I mean, other than he
Yeah,
has a
I think I
contract, but
think
he's not.
I think he probably is in the running for that seat. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
God.
I
Yeah.
absolutely think he is. But
So
but do I think that's a good idea? No. You know,
I feel like the Red Bull
I-
25 lineup is going to be Checo Perez and Daniel Ricciardo at this point.
yeah. Can you imagine?
No.
Can you imagine?
We
They'll be
called it here
fighting.
first, by the way.
Yeah, they'll be fighting to get out of Q1. Um, yeah, awful. I think the other thing that we should probably just quickly mention, although I hate mentioning it, is the commercial aspect to all of this. That, you know, there's clearly something about Checo, from a commercial point of view. Certainly, the amount of exposure he gives the company, as well as the team, across all of the Americas, um, but also, clearly there's some loyalty from the Christian Horner camp, for Checo. He seems to be able to drive backwards and often into a wall and still keep his seat. So yeah, interesting.
We've I'm saying this half jokingly with sort of tongue in cheek, but there are some receipts there, aren't there, right? Because Christian Horner seems adamant to keep him on, and then the other half of Red Bull does not want to. So it's amazing. I think this is again, all of this is connected, right? It's not just down to pure performance. Like there's more to it than just that. And like I think at every level of Red Bull, you can see this dilemma with Checo Perez sort of playing itself out. And I think I read that, I think Christian Horner's side, the 51% side, wants to keep him there, and then the other 49% does
Yeah.
not win out on this occasion, including, by the way, Helmut Marko. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But I think when I look at the entirety of our discussion and I think about what we've just said, my conclusion really is that it's not about Checo, it's about Red Bull's second driver problem. It's not that if they sack Checo, they're going to suddenly solve their issue. Their issue is, one, their car performance has dropped. Two, the car that they have is only drivable by one driver. And three, they have no alternatives that are able to bridge that gap. So keeping Checo, although it seems nuts,
It makes the most
actually, when you
sense.
think, yeah, when you think about what alternatives there are out there,
There's none.
what is there? They're already too late in the driver market to pick up the drivers that would have been that could have done it. And a lot of those drivers, and I'm talking about Carlos Sainz, I'm talking about Fernando Alonso, a lot of those drivers were deemed to be too difficult within the team. So you've got that dilemma. The drivers that are amenable are too slow, and the drivers that are quick are not amenable. They're stuck. They're stuck. I just don't see how they get
I
themselves
also think
out of
that
that.
conversely, this is bad for Checo too, right? Because he missed the window too. Had they not renewed him earlier on in the season, that could have meant something completely different for him as well, and he would have really been a great fit for many of the teams that still have openings left. So, I think they're kind of in it together, whether they like it or not now.
Yeah. And there you have it. That's our take on Checo and the seat at Red Bull. I think it's an odd call, but I think the more you think about it, the more understandable it sounds. Let us know what you guys think. Please like, as Ammar said, please subscribe. The more you guys subscribe, the more we can put out videos that you guys want. Please leave us a comment. Tell us what you think. Do you think that Red Bull are making the right decision? Do they have an alternative that we haven't thought about? We read all the comments as usual. We'll respond to as many as we possibly can, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Later.